Hi, my name is Vlad and our team welcomes you to the MotoPhD channel. With over 20 years of combined experience as professional racer, coach and mechanic and factory BMW Motorrad team, I have a lot of things to share. So don't hesitate and improve your knowledge to PhD level with us.
This leader class Aprilia is considered the most user-friendly sport bike for the city, although for me, as someone from the world of sports, the words sport bike and city are a bit incompatible. Nevertheless, even on this super powerful beast, today I'll show you how to properly, smoothly, and safely work with the throttle. After all, the throttle is really in our head. First of all, working with the throttle is about the bike's weight distribution. A motorcycle is generally stable only when one of its axles is loaded, either the front or the rear. The front axle is loaded when we brake. The rear axle is loaded when we're on the throttle. And to do this correctly, you first need to start with the proper position of your wrist. When the throttle is fully closed, your wrist should be as straight as possible. Fully closed throttle, straight wrist, and fingers on the brake. We never readjust our grip, because that can lead to accidental throttle. We open the throttle fully not just with our wrist, but also by lowering our body and, if needed, turning the throttle further with our elbow. Overall, moving forward and backward and compensating for inertia is a crucial aspect of riding a motorcycle. It's important not to overclose the throttle when braking and not to bend your wrist backward. Otherwise, your braking will be less effective, and you'll also lose throttle sensitivity. Of course, we'll start by breaking down the entry into a turn. The motorcycle turns with the front wheel, and the more weight you have on the front wheel, the more effectively it will turn. We already know, as soon as we add throttle, the weight of the motorcycle immediately shifts to the rear axle, to the rear wheel. Is there anything wrong if you're turning and the weight is on the rear wheel of the motorcycle? No, on the contrary, the motorcycle will be stable and controllable. Yes, you do lose a bit in steering efficiency and speed, but for city riding, that's not a big deal at all. Most turns are smooth enough. But if you start accelerating through a turn, that's where it can get dangerous. Throttle always straightens out the motorcycle. Accordingly, you should only start to accelerate when the motorcycle is already pointed toward the exit of the turn, so that the trajectory naturally straightens out. But if you start accelerating while still going through the turn, you'll get pulled to the outside. Because of this, you'll start leaning the motorcycle even more, it'll get scary, and instinctively you'll give it even more throttle so you don't tip over. And that's how you end up in a vicious cycle. The takeaway, go through the turn with steady, consistent throttle. Of course, you could say that we add throttle smoothly and little by little, but what does smoothly really mean, and what does little by little actually look like? And most importantly, when should you do it? I suggest we use the following rule as a basis. To make acceleration safe, you should never try to hold the motorcycle in a lean. The more you open the throttle, the more the motorcycle will want to straighten up, and you shouldn't get in its way. And for that, you need everything we talked about in the episode on steering, the right steering point, the right steering intensity, and of course, looking correctly through the turn. If you add throttle and you get pushed off your line, it means you added too much throttle or did it too early. Here's an example from racing. On the exit of a turn, the rider aims to build their line so they can lift the bike up as early as possible using their body, increase rear wheel grip, and open the throttle fully as soon as possible, all while being carried right out to the curb, to the edge of the track. On the telemetry, it looks something like this. From 0 to 100% throttle, we covered this many meters, and this is how the lean angle changed. Of course, it's not entirely accurate to compare sport bikes on racing tires with city riding, but in racing, they always use the most optimal way to achieve maximum efficiency. If you don't use the riding style itself, but rather the general logic of sport riding and adapt it for city riding, it actually turns out to be very safe and effective. What's dangerous about doing it differently? The result could be this, or even this. And if the tire suddenly grips, you could end up in a high side. And that's both expensive and painful. What can save you from that? Quality training, understanding the physics of the process, progressing step by step, properly assessing the road surface, and of course, the condition of your tires. Let's start with the first exercise. This skill is, without a doubt, being able to control a steady throttle both when turning and during maneuvers. I use the markings as a reference point and try to weave a slalom around them while keeping a steady throttle. It absolutely doesn't matter what speed you're going. It's best to do this in first gear, because in first gear the throttle is the most aggressive and jerky. And once you learn to control the throttle in first gear, it'll be much easier for you to do it in all other gears and at different RPMs. The next exercise is learning to control the throttle while hanging off the bike in different positions. Your task is to ride in a straight line while trying to hang off first to one side, then to the other, and make sure to keep the throttle as steady as possible and maintain the same speed. It's not hard to do this to the left, but to make it comfortable to lean to the right, you need to learn how to change the position of your wrist. We have two contact points, the pad under the pinky finger and the pad under the thumb. When we hang off and ride to the right, our goal is to rotate the wrist and relax the pad under the thumb a bit here, so that our wrist doesn't get bent awkwardly. Because if we keep our wrist straight and try to stick our elbow out to the side to hang off, we'll end up with a sharp bend right here. That's why our task is to loosen up a bit. Under the thumb and control the throttle more with the pad under the pinky finger. When we're riding to the left, our goal is to relax the pad near the thumb and rely more on the pinky. And here it's the opposite. After we've learned to control a steady throttle while going through a turn, our next task is to learn how to use the throttle to lift the motorcycle, because that's a natural phenomenon. To do this, we try to do a staggered slalom, adding and releasing the throttle. When exiting a turn, we add throttle. When entering, we close the throttle. We keep it steady to go through the turn, then throttle up on the exit, release. Adding throttle on the exit of the turn. As I mentioned before, our goal is to add throttle only when the motorcycle is already pointed in the right direction. Because adding throttle always widens your line, and if you do it too early, you might run into problems. We enter the turn with the front end loaded, hold a steady throttle, and wait for the right moment. When we can start straightening the motorcycle, that's when we add throttle. At the same time, if you pay attention, the acceleration is quite dynamic, but the main thing when adding throttle is not to try to force the motorcycle to stay on the exit line. If I start adding throttle now, do you see where it's pulling me? It's not like I'm intentionally going that way. It really does pull you outward, because adding throttle always widens your line as the motorcycle straightens up. That's why we wait steady, steady, steady. As the line opens up, we add throttle, and the motorcycle straightens out. Gradually increase the intensity of throttle as you exit the turn. You can feel how the motorcycle straightens you out because of this. But there are situations where you need to work the throttle more sharply and quickly, like when you have to swerve around a pothole you notice too late, ride over a curb, or deal with the dreaded wobble. To jump over a pothole you notice too late without hurting your hands, or to get over a curb, you need to quickly and forcefully shift your weight onto the rear wheel. A sharp and brief twist of the throttle will help you do this. But it's important to be ready physically, to grip the tank tightly with your knees, and to be aware of the amount of inertia that will pull you backward, so you can compensate for it using your core muscles. In these situations, if we follow the classic approach of adding throttle and leaning forward, we won't sufficiently unload the front suspension. That's why we need to feel the right moment and, on the contrary, give it some throttle as if we're pulling the motorcycle up, trying to unload the front wheel as much as possible. At this moment, make sure to keep your foot on the rear brake and your fingers on the clutch for control. This is what will help you safely get through a pothole if you notice it too late, because if you hit a pothole while braking, it can really jolt the front wheel. The most important thing, grip tightly with your knees and be aware of the amount of inertia pulling you backward, so you don't flip over or end up hanging on the handlebars. And briefly about wobbling. No matter how scary it is, the main thing during a wobble is not to try to hold the handlebars tightly with your hands. Your task is to relax your arms, grip the motorcycle tightly with your legs, and take the load off the front wheel by adding throttle. It's difficult, especially psychologically, but this is the only option. So, to sum up, gas is our friend, which can help us turn, help us make quick changes or go around obstacles. But for that, we need precise control, which we can develop first and foremost by being smooth with the throttle. After that, you can start working on sharper and more dynamic throttle application for dodging potholes, obstacles, quick acceleration, or doing wheelies. And I want to remind you that there's no better place to learn than a training lot or a racetrack. And you can always do that with the Ride Wide Motorcycle School. See you next time.